Detective Ryan Cole leaned back in his chair, letting out a satisfied sigh after another long day at the precinct. He was known for his sharp instincts and ability to solve cases quickly, but what really made him stand out was his confidence. Ryan had that kind of swagger that made people listen when he spoke. His colleagues admired him, or at least pretended to, and the community respected him even if they didn't always trust him. The precinct itself was a bustling place, full of noise and energy. Phones rang constantly, radios crackled with updates. From patrol cars and officers moved through the halls like bees in a hive. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was important, or so Ryan told himself whenever he felt guilty about cutting corners or bending rules. After all, this city needed strong men like him to keep things under control. At the far end of the room, near a dusty filing cabinet, sat Malik Johnson. Unlike Ryan, Malik didn't wear a badge or carry a gun. He wasn't a detective, nor was he anyone particularly important in the grand scheme of things, at least not according to most of the officers here. To them, Malik was just another face in the crowd, someone who shuffled papers and typed reports into the ancient computers the department refused to upgrade. They called him the pencil pusher behind his back, though sometimes they weren't. So careful about keeping their voices down, Malik never reacted to their jokes or snide comments. He simply went about his business, typing away with steady hands and occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook he kept tucked inside his jacket pocket. He wore glasses that gave him a bookish appearance, and his neatly pressed shirt suggested he took pride in how he presented himself, even if no one else seemed to notice. Ryan glanced over at Malik now, smirking as he nudged his partner, Detective Jake Miller. "Hey, look at our boy over there," Ryan said, jerking his thumb toward Malik. "Hard at work saving the world one spreadsheet at a time." Jake chuckled, leaning forward so he could see Malik better. "You think he knows we're talking about him, or does he just pretend not to hear us?" Ryan shrugged, taking a sip from his coffee cup. "Who cares? Guy's harmless anyway. Probably spends more time staring at numbers than actually doing anything useful." Their laughter echoed across the room, drawing glances from other officers, who either joined in or shook their heads disapprovingly. But Malik remained unfazed. If anything, he seemed to tune them out completely, focusing instead on the task at hand. What Ryan and the others didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Malik wasn't just typing random data into those outdated systems. Every keystroke, every note he scribbled in his little book, was part of something much bigger. For years, Malik had been quietly documenting everything he saw and heard at the precinct. He noticed patterns. The same officers involved in questionable arrests, the same excuses used to justify excessive force, the same victims left without justice. At first, he thought maybe he was being too sensitive, reading too much into isolated incidents. But the more he paid attention, the clearer it became. Something was very wrong here. It wasn't just about racism, though that was certainly part of it. It was about power. These men, and yes, they were almost always men, felt untouchable. They believed their badges gave them permission to act however they pleased, knowing there would be little to no consequences for their actions. And why? Wouldn't they feel that way? The system was designed to protect them, to shield them from accountability. But Malik knew better. Growing up in this city, he'd seen firsthand how the system failed people like him. He'd watched friends and family members get caught in its gears, chewed up and spit out without a second thought. That's why he'd taken this job in the first place. Not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he wanted to understand. He wanted to learn how the machine worked so he could figure out how to break it. And now, sitting there surrounded by the very people he was trying to expose, Malik felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't angry either, though he probably should have been. Instead, he felt patient, like he was waiting for the right moment to strike. Across the room, Ryan finally grew tired of mocking Malik and turned his attention back to Jake. "Anyway," he said, lowering his voice slightly, "did you hear about the protest downtown today? Bunch of kids holding signs, yelling about how we're all monsters or whatever." Jake rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I saw it on the news. Same old crap, like they have any idea what it's like out here. Exactly, Ryan agreed. They don't get it. They sit in their comfy little homes watching TV thinking they know everything. Meanwhile, we're the ones dealing with the real problems. Drugs, gangs, violence. It's everywhere. You can't fix this city with hugs and hashtags, Malik listened to their conversation without turning his head. He didn't need to. He'd heard variations of this speech countless times before. It was always the same. The cops were the good guys, the victims of unfair criticism, the only thing standing between order and chaos. Never mind the fact that many of the problems Ryan referred to were exacerbated by the very tactics he defended. Never mind the innocent lives ruined by wrongful arrests or violent encounters gone wrong. As the evening wore on, the precinct began to empty out. Officers headed home, leaving Malik alone in the quiet office. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his temples. This job wasn't easy, not physically, but mentally. Keeping track of everything, staying vigilant, resisting the urge to lash out when provoked, it took a toll. But Malik reminded himself why he was doing this. Out in the streets, people were fighting for change. Activists like Elena Rivera were organizing protests speaking truth to power, demanding justice. And while Malik couldn't march alongside them, he could support their cause in his own way. By gathering evidence, by building a case against the corrupt system that had oppressed his community for far too long. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his notebook, flipping through the pages until he found the latest entry. It was a list of names of officers involved in suspicious activities, names of victims whose stories had been ignored. Each name was accompanied by dates, locations, and brief descriptions of incidents. Some entries were accompanied by sketches or diagrams, visual aids to help him remember details. Malik stared at the page for a long time, his mind racing with possibilities. Someday soon, he thought, this information would come in handy. Someday the world would see the truth. Until then, he would keep working, keep observing, and above all, keep waiting. Outside, the sun had set, casting the city in shadows. Streetlights flickered to life, illuminating sidewalks where protesters still chanted slogans and held up signs. Inside the precinct, Malik continued typing, his fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing, a reminder that even in the darkest moments progress was possible. Unbeknownst to him, fate was already setting the stage for something extraordinary, something that would change not only his life but the lives of everyone in the city. All it would take was one decision, one bold move, and everything would fall into place. The next morning, Malik arrived at the precinct early, as usual. He carried his usual cup of coffee and a folder filled with documents he had been working on late into the night. As he walked through the halls, he noticed something unusual. An eerie quietness hung over the station. Normally, there was chatter among the officers, radios buzzing, phones ringing off the hook. But today, it felt like everyone was holding their breath. Malik didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just another slow day, or maybe the overnight shift hadn't brought in many calls. Whatever the reason, he settled into his desk and began reviewing the files he'd brought with him. These were reports detailing misconduct within the department, things he had carefully documented over months. Each page made his stomach churn, but they also fueled his determination to make a difference. About an hour later, Detective Ryan Cole strolled in, looking bleary-eyed and annoyed. His hair was messy and his tie was loose around his neck. Clearly, he wasn't having a good start to his day either. When he spotted Malik already at work, he scowled and muttered something under his breath before heading to his own desk. Before Ryan could even sit down, Captain Lewis emerged from his office, his face pale and drawn. The captain rarely showed emotion, so seeing him look this shaken immediately caught everyone's attention. "Listen up," he barked, snapping the room to silence. "We've got a meeting upstairs in 10 minutes. Everyone needs to be there." "What's going on?" someone asked. Captain Lewis hesitated, then shook his head. "Just be there. You'll find out soon enough." The officers exchanged confused glances as they filed out of the room. Malik stayed behind for a moment, watching them leave. Something about this felt strange. Why would they call a sudden meeting without giving any details? Still, he grabbed his notebook and followed the group upstairs to the conference room. When Malik entered the room, he saw that it was packed, not just with officers but also with city officials, including Mayor Patricia Lane. She stood at the front of the room, her expression serious. Next to her was a younger man in a suit, likely a representative from the city council. The atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating. Mayor Lane cleared her throat and began speaking. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know this is unexpected, but recent events have forced us to take immediate action." She paused, letting her words sink in. "As you may know, we've faced growing unrest in our community due to issues involving law enforcement. Protests have erupted, trust has eroded, and frankly, we're running out of time to address these concerns." Malik listened intently, his heart pounding. This sounded bigger than just another PR statement. What exactly was she getting at? "With that in mind," Mayor Lane continued, "I've decided to appoint an interim chief of police to lead the department during this critical time." She turned slightly, gesturing toward Malik. "That person will be Mr. Malik Johnson." The room exploded into murmurs. Officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats while some openly gawked at Malik. Even Captain Lewis looked stunned. Ryan's jaw dropped, and he leaned over to whisper to Jake Miller. "Did she just say what I think she said?" Malik himself was shocked. He hadn't expected this, not in a million years. Sure, he'd hoped his efforts would eventually lead to change, but becoming the interim chief, that was beyond anything he'd imagined. Mayor Lane raised her hand to silence the room. "I understand this decision may come as a surprise, but let me explain my reasoning. Mr. Johnson has demonstrated unparalleled dedication to improving our department's operations. His expertise in policy reform and data analysis makes him uniquely qualified to guide us through this transition period. We need someone who can restore public trust, and I believe Mr. Johnson is the right person for the job." Ryan couldn't hold back anymore. He stood up abruptly, glaring at Malik. "Are you kidding me? This guy doesn't even wear a badge. How's he supposed to lead us?" Other officers nodded in agreement, their voices rising in protest. Malik remained seated, his expression unreadable. He knew this reaction was inevitable, but hearing it firsthand still stung. Mayor Lane held her ground. "Detective Cole, please sit down. This decision has been made, and it's final. If anyone disagrees, you're welcome to file a formal complaint. But for now, I expect full cooperation from every single one of you." Reluctantly, Ryan sank back into his chair, crossing his arms tightly across his chest. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Mayor Lane outlined Malik's new responsibilities, emphasizing the importance of transparency and accountability. By the time she finished speaking, the tension in the room was palpable. Afterward, Malik returned to his desk, trying to process everything that had happened. It felt surreal. Just yesterday, he was the target of ridicule, dismissed as insignificant. Today, he was the interim chief of police. He knew this promotion wouldn't magically solve the problems plaguing the department or the city, but it was a step in the right direction. Ryan, meanwhile, was fuming. He paced around the precinct, muttering angrily about how unfair this whole situation was. "They're just handing him the job because he's black," he complained to anyone who would listen. "It's all about optics now. Doesn't matter if you actually deserve it." Jake tried to calm him down. "Hey, man, maybe it's not so bad. Think about it. He's just paperwork. We do the real work. Let him deal with the politics while we keep doing our thing." But Ryan wasn't convinced. "You don't get it, Jake. Once he's in charge, he's gonna try to change everything. Body cameras, stricter rules, blah, blah, blah. We won't be able to do our jobs anymore." As the day went on, word spread throughout the department about Malik's appointment. Some officers grumbled about it while others shrugged it off, figuring it wouldn't last long. A few even congratulated Malik, though their smiles seemed forced. Later that afternoon, Malik called a brief meeting with the senior staff to introduce himself properly. Standing in front of the group, he spoke calmly and clearly. "I know this is a challenging time for all of us," he began. "Trust between the community and the police is at an all-time low, and rebuilding that trust won't be easy. But I'm here to help. Together we can create meaningful change." Ryan rolled his eyes, barely hiding his disdain. When Malik finished speaking, Ryan raised his hand sarcastically. "So, Chief," he drawled, "what's your plan for dealing with criminals? Are we just going to give them hugs now?" A few officers snickered, but Malik didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he looked directly at Ryan and replied, "My plan is simple. Justice. Not revenge, not shortcuts, justice. If you have a problem with that, Detective Cole, I suggest you speak to me privately." Ryan clenched his fists but said nothing. For the first time, he realized that mocking Malik might not be as easy as it used to be. By the end of the day, Malik felt exhausted but hopeful. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it. As he packed up his things to leave, he glanced around the precinct. The faces staring back at him ranged from hostile to indifferent, but none of that mattered. What mattered was proving that change was possible, even in a place where it seemed impossible. Outside, the sun was setting, casting golden light over the city. Protesters still gathered downtown, their voices echoing through the streets. Malik took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he allowed himself a small smile. Malik's first week as interim chief was filled with challenges. He knew that gaining the trust of both his officers and the community wouldn't happen overnight, but he was determined to try. Every morning, he arrived at the precinct early, reviewing files and preparing strategies for the day ahead. His goal was clear: transform the department into a force that served everyone fairly, not just those who looked like them. One of his first actions was to install body cameras on all officers. It wasn't a popular decision among the rank and file. Many grumbled about being watched constantly, claiming it made them feel like criminals themselves. Ryan Cole led the resistance, loudly voicing his complaints whenever possible. "It's ridiculous," he told anyone who would listen. "We're out there risking our lives every day, and now they want us to wear these things? What's next? Microphones in our cars?" Despite the backlash, Malik pushed forward. He held training sessions to explain how the cameras worked and why they were important. "This isn't about catching you doing something wrong," he said during one session. "It's about accountability, for everyone. If we act with integrity, there's nothing to fear." The officers weren't convinced, but they reluctantly complied. Malik also introduced stricter reporting protocols, requiring detailed documentation for every arrest and use of force. Some saw this as unnecessary paperwork, but Malik insisted it was vital for transparency. "Every action we take reflects on this department," he reminded them. "We need to show the public that we care about fairness." To bridge the gap between the police and the community, Malik partnered with Elena Rivera, a local activist known for her work advocating for police reform. Together, they organized town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns directly to officers. These events were tense at first. Many attendees came ready to vent their frustrations. Accusing the department of racism and corruption, officers sat stiffly in their seats, defensive and uncomfortable. At one meeting, a young woman stood up and pointed at Ryan. "You arrested my brother last year," she shouted. "He didn't even do anything wrong, and when we tried to file a complaint, no one listened." Ryan shifted uneasily in his chair, avoiding eye contact. Before he could respond, Malik stepped in. "I'm sorry for what happened to your family," he said sincerely. "That's exactly why we're here, to make sure things like that don't happen again. Your voice matters, and we're listening." Elena nodded approvingly. She had been skeptical of Malik at first, assuming his appointment was just another PR stunt. But seeing him genuinely engage with the community changed her mind. After the meeting, she approached him privately. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Most people in your position would ignore the criticism or sugarcoat everything. But you actually seem to care." Malik smiled faintly. "I do care. This city deserves better, and so does its police force. but it's going to take time and effort from both sides. While Malik worked to build trust externally, tensions simmered within the department. Ryan and his allies continued to resist the changes. Finding ways to undermine Malik's authority, they disabled their body cameras during routine patrols, claiming technical issues. Reports were filed late, or not at all, and behind closed doors they mocked Malik relentlessly. "You really think this is going to fix anything?" Ryan sneered, one afternoon leaning against a desk as Malik walked by. "All these rules and meetings, people are still going to hate us no matter what we do." Malik stopped and turned to face him. "Maybe," he said calmly. "But if we stop trying, then we've already failed. Is that what you want? To give up?" Ryan clenched his jaw but didn't reply. Instead, he stormed off, muttering under his breath. Jake watched the exchange from nearby, shaking his head. "You know, Ryan," he said quietly. "Maybe instead of fighting him, we should see where this goes. Could be good for us in the long run." "Good for us?" Ryan snapped. "How? We're losing control of everything. Soon enough, we won't even be able to do our jobs without someone breathing down our necks." Jake shrugged, unsure how to respond. Deep down, he agreed with Ryan. This new direction felt restrictive, but part of him wondered if Malik might actually be onto something. Change was hard, especially in a place as stubborn as the police department, but maybe, just maybe, it was necessary. As the weeks passed, Malik started noticing patterns in the reports coming across his desk. One name kept appearing: Ryan Cole. There were multiple complaints about excessive force, questionable arrests, and disrespectful behavior. At first, Malik dismissed it as coincidence. After all, Ryan was a high-profile detective who dealt with tough cases. But the more he dug, the more troubling the picture became. Late one night, Malik stayed in his office poring over old case files. Buried deep in the archives, he found evidence of misconduct involving Ryan and several other officers. They had framed innocent individuals to boost arrest statistics, falsifying reports and planting evidence to justify their actions. It was damning proof, one that could bring down not only Ryan, but the entire corrupt system he represented. Malik leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. This was bigger than he'd anticipated. Exposing this kind of corruption would shake the department to its core. Officers would lose their badges, lawsuits would pile up, and public outrage would reach a fever pitch. But ignoring it wasn't an option either. Justice demanded action. The next morning, Malik called Ryan into his office. Closing the door behind them, he placed the incriminating documents on the desk. "I need to talk to you about something," he said evenly. Ryan glanced at the papers, his expression unreadable. "What's this?" he asked cautiously. "It's evidence of misconduct," Malik replied. "Several incidents involving you and your team. I've reviewed the details carefully, and I can't ignore what I've found." Ryan's face hardened. "You're making a big mistake," he warned. "You think pointing fingers is going to solve anything? You'll regret this." Malik met his gaze steadily. "If you continue down this path, Detective Cole, I won't hesitate to take disciplinary action. Consider this your warning." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Outside, he muttered angrily to himself, vowing to fight back. But deep down, he knew Malik had him cornered. Back in his office, Malik exhaled slowly. He had taken the first step toward rooting out corruption, but the battle was far from over. Still, he felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, real change seemed possible. All it would take was persistence and courage. The tension between Malik Johnson and Detective Ryan Cole reached its breaking point just days after their heated confrontation in Malik's office. Knowing he couldn't ignore the evidence any longer, Malik decided to act. He contacted internal affairs and shared the incriminating documents he'd uncovered about Ryan and his team. Together, they devised a plan, a sting operation to catch Ryan in the act of misconduct during another fabricated arrest. It was risky, dangerous even, but Malik knew it was the only way to prove beyond doubt that Ryan was guilty. If everything went according to plan, Ryan would lead them straight into a trap, exposing not only himself but also the systemic corruption within the department. But if something went wrong, Malik risked losing everything he had worked so hard to build. The setup took place late one evening in a rundown neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Reports had come in about drug activity in the area, giving internal affairs the perfect cover to stage the operation. Unbeknownst to Ryan, the suspect he was sent to apprehend was actually an undercover agent posing as a low-level dealer. The goal was simple: let Ryan make his move, then document every step of his misconduct. Ryan arrived at the scene with his usual swagger, flanked by two rookie officers who looked nervous but eager to impress him. As they approached the supposed dealer, Ryan barked orders, waving his flashlight around like he owned the street. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted, pulling out his handcuffs before the suspect could even react. But things didn't go smoothly. When the undercover agent resisted arrest, as planned, Ryan lost his temper. He shoved the suspect against a wall, shouting insults and accusations that weren't part of the script. Then, without warning, he pulled a small bag of fake drugs from his pocket and slipped it into the suspect's jacket. That's when Malik stepped out of the shadows, accompanied by agents from Internal Affairs. "Detective Cole," he called out, his voice calm but firm. "Step away from the suspect." Ryan froze, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Malik. For a split second, disbelief flashed across his face, followed quickly by rage. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, stepping back from the suspect. "Some kind of joke?" "No joke," Malik replied, gesturing toward the other agents. "We've been watching you, Ryan. Every move you made tonight has been recorded." Realization dawned on Ryan's face and panic set in. Without thinking, he turned and bolted, shoving past the agents and disappearing into the darkness. The chase was on. Malik hesitated for a moment, torn between letting Internal Affairs handle the situation and pursuing Ryan himself. But something inside him clicked. This wasn't just about catching a corrupt cop. It was personal now. Taking a deep breath, Malik sprinted after Ryan, his heart pounding as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The chase led them into an abandoned warehouse nearby, its vast interior illuminated only by shafts of moonlight streaming through broken windows. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls. Rusty machinery and piles of discarded crates created a maze-like environment, making it easy to get lost or ambushed. Ryan darted around corners, trying desperately to shake off his pursuer, but Malik stayed close, driven by a mix of determination and anger. He thought about all the lives Ryan had destroyed, all the innocent people whose trust in law enforcement had been shattered because of men like him. This wasn't just about justice. It was about redemption. Finally, Ryan stumbled into a dead end, trapped between a stack of crates and a crumbling brick wall. Breathing heavily, he turned to face Malik, his expression shifting from fear to defiance. "You think this proves anything?" he spat, clutching a piece of rebar he'd picked up along the way. "This whole thing is a setup. Nobody's gonna believe you over me?" Malik raised his hand slightly, showing he wasn't armed. "It doesn't matter what you say, Ryan. The truth speaks for itself. We have video footage, audio recordings, and witnesses. You're done." Ryan lunged forward, swinging the rebar wildly. Malik ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding a blow to the head. He grabbed a nearby pipe and used it to block Ryan's next attack, the metallic clang ringing out in the empty space. The fight was clumsy but intense, each man fueled by years of pent-up frustration. Eventually, Malik managed to disarm Ryan, knocking the rebar out of his hand and pinning him against the wall. Both men were breathing heavily, sweat dripping down their faces. Ryan glared at Malik, hatred burning in his eyes. "You'll never win," he growled. "Guys like you always lose in the end." Malik leaned in closer, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but not today." At that moment, agents from Internal Affairs burst into the room, weapons drawn. They quickly subdued Ryan, reading him his rights as they slapped handcuffs onto his wrists. As they led him away, Ryan continued to shout insults, though his voice grew weaker with each passing second. Malik stood there for a moment, catching his breath and processing what had just happened. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. There would be trials, investigations, and likely backlash from those still loyal to Ryan. But for the first time in years, Malik felt a sense of hope. Justice had been served, if only in a small way. Outside, the patrol car's flashing lights cast eerie shadows across the ground. Agents loaded Ryan into the back seat while others secured the scene. Malik watched silently, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. Change wouldn't come overnight, but tonight marked a turning point, a crack in the foundation of corruption that had plagued the department for far too long. As the patrol car drove off into the night, Malik turned and walked back toward the Yao precinct. Exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders, but he refused to give in to it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, he allowed himself a small victory. For once, the good guys had won. The arrest of Detective Ryan Cole sent shockwaves through the city. News of his misconduct spread quickly, dominating headlines and sparking heated debates across social media. For some, it was proof that the system could hold corrupt officers accountable. For others, it was just another example of politics interfering with law enforcement. Either way, everyone had an opinion, and Malik Johnson found himself at the center of it all. As interim chief, Malik knew he couldn't afford to let public pressure sway him. The case against Ryan was strong, supported by video footage, audio, recordings, and eyewitness accounts. Yet Malik also understood that this wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about exposing a culture of corruption that had festered within the department for decades. If handled poorly, the trial could devolve into chaos, further eroding trust between the police and the community. Malik worked closely with the district attorney's office to ensure the prosecution was thorough and fair. Every piece of evidence was meticulously reviewed, every witness statement double-checked for accuracy. At the same time, he made efforts to keep the public informed, holding press conferences to explain the situation without revealing sensitive details. This isn't about revenge, he emphasized during one such briefing. It's about accountability for everyone. Despite his best efforts, criticism came from all sides. Some accused Malik of targeting Ryan because of personal grievances, claiming the investigation was biased. Others argued that Malik wasn't doing enough to root out corruption, suggesting that more officers should face charges. Even within the department, tensions ran high. Officers who once mocked Malik now whispered about how their careers might be next on the chopping block. Ryan's trial began weeks later in a packed courtroom. Spectators filled the benches, including members of the community, reporters, and even a few uniformed officers. Elena Rivera, the activist who had partnered with Malik on reform initiatives, sat near the front, her arms crossed tightly as she watched the proceedings unfold. On the other side of the aisle, supporters of Ryan muttered angrily under their breath, shaking their heads whenever new evidence was presented. The prosecution laid out its case methodically, presenting damning proof of Ryan's involvement in framing innocent individuals and falsifying reports. Videos showed him planting evidence during the sting operation, while audio clips captured his threats against colleagues who dared question his methods. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting stories of harassment, intimidation, and abuse at Ryan's hands. Throughout it all, Ryan remained defiant. Dressed in an ill-fitting suit, his hands cuffed together, he glared at anyone who dared look at him. His lawyer tried to paint him as a scapegoat, arguing that Ryan was being punished for doing what he believed was necessary to protect the city. "My client is not perfect," the lawyer admitted during closing arguments. "But neither is the system he served. To blame him alone for these issues is unfair and unjust." When it was Malik's turn to testify, the courtroom fell silent. He walked steadily to the stand, his expression calm but resolute. Under questioning, he described the painstaking process of uncovering Ryan's misconduct, emphasizing how each discovery led to another layer of corruption. "I didn't set out to destroy anyone," he said firmly. I wanted to fix a broken system. And I believe that starts with holding people accountable for their actions. By the end of the trial, there was little doubt about Ryan's guilt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before returning a verdict. Guilty on multiple counts of misconduct, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. As the judge read the sentence, several years in prison, a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ryan sat motionless, his face pale and expressionless as guards escorted him away. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted from those who had gathered to hear the verdict. Protesters held up signs reading, "Justice served and no more corruption," chanting slogans as cameras flashed around them. Elena stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "This is a victory," she declared, her voice ringing with emotion. "But it's only the beginning. We need to keep pushing for real change, not just in this department, but everywhere." Back at the precinct, reactions were mixed. Some officers breathed sighs of relief, glad to see Ryan brought to justice. Others grumbled about how the trial would make their jobs harder, fearing increased scrutiny from the public and higher-ups alike. Captain Lewis called a meeting to address the situation, urging everyone to stay focused on their duties. "What happened with Ryan doesn't define us," he said gravely. "We have a chance to rebuild trust, to show the community that we're better than this." Malik stood quietly at the back of the room, observing the varied expressions on his colleagues' faces. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust required more than punishing wrongdoing. It meant creating a culture where integrity was valued above all else. To that end, Malik announced plans to expand training programs, increase transparency, and foster stronger ties with local organizations like Elena's group. Not everyone welcomed these changes. A handful of officers resigned rather than adapt to the new policies, while others openly resisted, dragging their feet on assignments or complaining loudly about political correctness. But slowly, attitudes began to shift. Younger recruits embraced the reforms, eager to prove they could serve honorably without compromising their values. Community members started attending town hall meetings again, sharing constructive feedback instead of accusations. One evening, Malik stayed late at the precinct, reviewing progress reports and planning future initiatives. As he worked, Elena stopped by unexpectedly. She carried a small box wrapped in plain brown paper, which she placed gently on his desk. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly, "for everything you've done." Malik looked surprised. "Thank me? You've been fighting for this long before I ever got involved." She smiled faintly. "True, but you're making it happen. This," she gestured toward the box, "is just a token of appreciation. Open it when you get home." After she left, Malik finished up his work and headed outside. The city skyline glowed faintly in the distance, its lights reflecting off puddles left by an earlier rainstorm. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride. Change was possible, even in a place as stubborn as this department. At home, he opened the box Elena had given him. Inside was a simple plaque engraved with a quote, "Justice delayed is justice denied." Malik stared at it for a long moment, then placed it carefully on his bookshelf. It was a reminder of why he'd taken on this role, and why he couldn't stop now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, Malik let himself rest, knowing he had made a difference. Months passed since Ryan Cole's conviction, and the city began to feel different. The streets were quieter, not because fear kept people indoors, but because trust was slowly returning. Protests still happened occasionally, but they weren't filled with anger anymore. Instead, they felt like conversations, moments where the community could voice its hopes and concerns without fear of retaliation. At the center of this change was Malik Johnson, who had proven himself not just as a leader, but as someone willing to fight for justice, even when it meant challenging his own colleagues. When Mayor Patricia Lane announced that Malik would become the permanent chief of police, no one was surprised. He had earned the position through hard work, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to reform. The ceremony took place in the same conference room where Malik had first been introduced as interim chief. This time, however, the mood was celebratory. Officers lined up neatly in their uniforms, standing shoulder to shoulder with community members who had once distrusted them. Even Elena Rivera attended, her presence a testament to how far things had come. As Malik placed his hand on the book and recited the oath, he felt a surge of emotion. It wasn't pride exactly. It was something deeper, a sense of purpose. For years he'd dreamed of making a difference, of proving that change was possible even in places resistant to it. Now, here he was, leading the very department he'd once seen as broken beyond repair. As the final words left his lips, applause erupted throughout the room. Some officers clapped hesitantly, unsure what the future held, while others cheered enthusiastically, ready to embrace the new era Malik represented. After the ceremony, Malik addressed the crowd, speaking directly to both the officers and the community members present. "Today isn't about me," he began, his voice steady and clear. "It's about us, all of us, about building bridges, restoring trust, and creating a safer, fairer city for everyone. That won't happen overnight. There will be challenges, setbacks, and disagreements along the way. But if we stay committed to doing what's right, I believe we can achieve something remarkable." His words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from those gathered. When the event ended, people lingered, chatting excitedly about what lay ahead. Officers shook hands with activists, sharing ideas for improving relations between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. It was a small step perhaps, but it symbolized progress, a willingness to listen and learn from one another. In the weeks that followed, Malik implemented sweeping changes designed to reshape the culture of the department. He introduced mandatory training sessions on de-escalation techniques, implicit bias awareness, and mental health support. Officers were encouraged to engage with residents outside of crisis situations, attending block parties, school events, and community meetings. Body cameras became standard equipment, with strict rules ensuring they were used properly. Any officer found tampering with or disabling their camera faced immediate disciplinary action. These reforms weren't universally popular. Some veteran officers grumbled about feeling micromanaged, while others worried that focusing too much on soft skills would make them less effective in dangerous situations. But Malik remained steadfast, reminding everyone why these changes mattered. "Our job isn't just to enforce laws," he said during one training session. "It's to protect and serve, and you can't do that unless people trust you." Younger recruits embraced the shift wholeheartedly, seeing it as an opportunity to redefine policing for a new generation. Among them was Officer Lisa Carter, a rookie who had joined the force shortly after Malik became interim chief. She admired his dedication and often sought his advice when navigating difficult cases. "You've shown us that being a cop doesn't mean choosing between compassion and toughness," she told him one day. "We can be both, and we should be." Malik smiled faintly. "That's exactly right. It's not easy, but it's worth it." Meanwhile, Ryan Cole served out his sentence in prison, reflecting bitterly on how underestimating Malik had cost him everything. Letters from former colleagues trickled in at first, but over time, they stopped coming altogether. In court documents, filed during appeals hearings, Ryan claimed he was unfairly targeted, blaming systemic failures rather than taking responsibility for his actions. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. He had let power go to his head, believing himself untouchable until it was too late. Back in the precinct, Malik continued working tirelessly to ensure the department lived up to its new standards. Progress was slow but steady. Crime rates dropped slightly as trust improved and more citizens began cooperating with investigations. Community feedback grew increasingly positive, with many praising individual officers for their professionalism and empathy. One evening, Malik walked through the halls of the station, observing the hustle and bustle around him. Two young recruits sat at adjacent desks, discussing strategies for diffusing tense situations without resorting to force. Nearby, a seasoned detective reviewed case files with a civilian liaison, seeking input on how best to approach sensitive matters. These small interactions might have seemed insignificant, but to Malik, they represented hope, a sign that the seeds of change were taking root. As he prepared to leave for the night, Malik paused by the bulletin board near the entrance. Someone had pinned up a photo of the recent swearing-in ceremony, surrounded by handwritten notes from officers and community members alike. One note caught his eye. "Thank you for showing us that justice isn't just a word. It's a choice." Malik smiled softly, tucking the memory away in his mind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, standing amidst the quiet hum of activity, he allowed himself to feel proud, not of what he'd accomplished alone, but of what they were achieving together. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but Malik knew one thing for certain: this city was better off than it had been before, and that made every sleepless night, every heated argument, every moment of doubt worth it.